Great. Namaste all, and shalom to everybody as well. Welcome to our webinar on Swastika versus the Hitler's hooked cross and interfaith dialogue. This is a very important topic that we have been working on over the past couple of years. Before that, the efforts have been going on quite a while, but over the past couple of years, given certain things that have been happening within the communities across, as well as the rise in hate crimes in the United States as well as in Canada, we have been seeing a discussion around swastika, efforts to ban the symbol as a symbol of hate, whether it's through education policies or through actual policies across states in the United States or in provinces in Canada as well. Recently, the Canadian government has been contemplating a bill that would ban swastika and other so-called hate symbols. So today's discussion will be focusing on, is the swastika a symbol of hate versus the Hitler's hooked cross, number one. Number two is, what can communities do to promote a better mutual understanding of these two different types of symbols while condemning the right symbols, such as the Hitler's hooked cross, or what we call Nazi Hakenkreuz, as a symbol of hate, versus the swastika, which is a symbol of peace, well-being, and prosperity. Namaste, my name is Nikunj Trivedi, and I'm the president of Kona. Kona is a grassroots Hindu advocacy and civil rights organization that works on improving the understanding of Hindu Dharma or Hinduism within North America, as well as working with our partners across the world, as well as communities beyond the Hindu fold, such as the Jewish community, the Buddhist community, the Jain community, the Christian community, the African American communities, and many others, to develop bridges of mutual understanding and respect. So I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. We have a lot of interest in the webinar. So we have a series of eminent speakers and panelists. So I'm going to just quickly introduce everybody. So first and foremost, we have Dr. Bawa Jain. Dr. Bawa Jain is currently the founder and president of the Center for Responsible Leadership and the Secretary General for the World Council of Religious Leaders. He has been inspired and dedicated by his guru and spiritual father, His Holiness Acharya Sushil Kumar Maharaj Ji. He has traveled extensively for 2.5 years on behalf of the creation of the World Council of Religious Leaders, a direct outcome of the Millennium World Peace Summit. The council was successfully launched at the United Nations in Bangkok in June of 2002. And at the request of preeminent world spiritual leaders who are present, Mr. Jain continues to serve as the Secretary General of the World Council. The council is charged with being a strong resource and collaborator with the United Nations and other international and national organizations whose purpose includes peace, harmony, tolerance, and mutual respect among human beings and the evolution of world social and economic justice. He is committed to global interfaith movements and serves as the trustee of the Council for the Parliament of World Religions even today. He continues to counsel governmental, business, and religious organizations on deeper involvement in interfaith and global activities. He serves on various initiatives. One of them is the Earth Charter Initiatives International Resource Team, the Advisory Board for Center of Religion and Diplomacy, and many others. He has co-founded the Global Mission for the Preservation of Sacred Sites. He has conceived and organized the historic Hindu-Jewish summits and negotiated declarations, which for the first time had the most eminent Jewish leaders recognize that the swastika is a sacred symbol for the Hindus. We also have Dr. Nathan Katz. He's a distinguished professor emeritus in the School of International and Public Affairs at the Florida International University. He was the founding chair of the Department of Religious Studies at the Bhagwan Mahavir Professor of Jain Studies, the Kaufman Professor for Global Entrepreneurship in the College of Business Administration, and affiliated faculty in the College of Medicine, director of Jewish Studies, and founder and director emeritus of the Innovative Program in the Study of Spirituality. He's also the co-founder and co-editor of the Journal of Indo-Judaic Studies. He's an author of 15 books and more than 100 scholarly and popular articles. He also won the President's Award for Achievement and Excellence in 1999, which is the most prestigious award distinction by the university. His Who Are the Jews of India was the finalist for the 2000 National Jewish Book Award in the Sephardic Studies, and also earned the 2004 Vak Devi Saraswati Samman Award from India. His research spans religions traditions of South Asia and focuses on Indo-Judaic studies. Again, he has edited and written 15 books about Buddhism, Hinduism, and Judaism. He has also been editor of an academic journal devoted to exploring interaction and affinities between Indian and Jewish civilizations, the Indo-Judaic Studies, and has pioneered in establishing dialogues between Jews and Hindus and Buddhists on international and local levels. In 1990, he was invited at the historic Tibetan Jewish dialogue hosted by the Dalai Lama at his place in Dharamsala, India, and has been featured in Roger Kamenetz's bestseller, The Jew in the Lotus, and he has made an appearance in the film of the same title. He was engaged with a series, like I said, the Hindu-Jewish summits of 2007 to 2012, and has spoken about the Jain and Jewish communities in North America for Jaina. Having retired from FIU, he and his wife, Ellen Goldberg, lead Jewish interest tours of India, and he lectures widely, conducts virtual programs and seminars. Regularly, he teaches at CYS, which is the College of Jewish Studies, Shivananda Ashram at Bahamas, and the Kivunam in Israel. We also have Dr. T.K. Nakagaki, who is the president of Haiwa Peace and Reconciliation Foundation of New York. He's also the president emeritus of the Buddhist Council of New York, Hiroshima Peace Ambassador, Nagasaki Peace Correspondent, an honorary board member of the Interfaith Center of New York, and a community clergy liaison for the New York City Police Department. He's an author of the Buddhist Swastika and the Hitler's Cross, rescuing a symbol of peace from the forces of hate. The Japanese version, Manji and Hakenkreuz, was published in Gendai Shokan publisher in Tokyo in 2013. We also have Dr. Ragini Sharma, who's an educator, advocate, and community leader in the Greater Toronto Area. In her professional life, Dr. Sharma has worked for over 25 years with individuals, families, and communities of diverse backgrounds to support their human dignity and for their economic, social, and political rights. She has extensive experience working with seniors, immigrants, parents, and children in diverse spheres, such as social service agencies, community centers, and schools. She completed her doctoral studies in education in 2016. As a practicing Hindu, Dr. Sharma is a passionate learner and educator of Hinduism and has represented Hinduism at numerous interfaith events. She was a founder member of the Hindu Heritage Month Committee at the Toronto District School Board and has written a resource guide on Hinduism for educators and others. She works with many public school boards and public agencies to advocate for Hindus and educate against Hinduphobia. Last but not least, we have Jeff Kelman. Jeff Kelman was born and raised in a Jewish home where it was taken for granted that a swastika was hated symbol of power of the Nazi Third Reich, and only this symbol. To the community which Kelman belonged, there existed no other symbols sharing this shape. In 2020, Kelman earned his master's in Holocaust and Genocide Studies from Gratz College with his MA thesis titled The Hakenkreuz, Swastika, and the Christian Cross. Kelman now engages in outreach and education related to the swastika and the Hakenkreuz. So I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for being on this panel today. I know it took a little while for the introduction, but it was necessary because of the decorated backgrounds of each of the speakers who bring something valuable to this panel. So what I would like to do is start with Dr. T.K. Nakagaki for his opening comments about what we are talking about here today and why we are here today.
Okay. So, yeah, I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you very much for this gathering. I'm very grateful to have these wonderful speakers today, and we can talk about something very important. And so maybe if somebody sees my background to begin with, I thought that's a good idea. I think I got the idea from the Dr. Katz for the other speakers, because his office always have the swastika from the beginning, and so students ask the question. So I do the same way this time. So when you look up this, what's going on here? Is it anything to do with the hate or something like that, or the evilness, all those things that we're talking about? But of course, if you know what they are, I mean, especially for us, these are all dharmic symbol. There's nothing in here anything is evil at all, and all respected from the Hindu tradition, Buddhist tradition, Jain tradition. So these are all symbols among those people. So I thought it would be nice to begin with a little, yeah, of course, the people who are here expected to have this kind of conversation. So I guess there's nothing to, surprising maybe for some people. But one of the reasons that I wanted to have this also session is because February 1st to February 7th, there's an Interfaith Harmony Week, UN World Interfaith Harmony Week. And during those time, we do have a lot of symbolism, religious symbol came up, and then they show the symbols all connected, like a circles and different symbols all around. But yet somehow we never seen the swastika there during this time. And so hopefully we could do maybe the first week of the particular Harmony Week, but yet I got so busy. But then I realized some people do month, the February entire month they have a interfaith kind of connected events. So maybe because the first week is so so much program, so everybody just have so much of interface. So maybe better to have 1 week after, and so the so today is February 15th, which is actually for me is very important because that's the in Japan, Japanese Buddhist. This is Buddha's enlightenment or parinirvana day, the passing away of the Buddha.
Oh.
So I did have a events this morning actually connected to India and so forth. These are all dharmic traditions or the Buddhist tradition. So for us, especially the Asian people who grew up in Asia or Japan or other country of the Buddhism, then when we see the swastika, that's basically means, commonly knows for, especially Japan, everybody knows as the Buddhist temple. Because when you see the map, everything, it's just filled with the swastika with a map. So if you travel to Japan, you probably see the swastika on the many maps there. That means Buddhist temple, nothing to do with the Germany or the Nazi Germany. And those maps officially accepted like 150 years ago, so before the Hitler anyway. So but the things what I like to do here today is the swastika itself is such a history like over at least for Buddhism over 2,000 years, like a Jain too, but the Hindu goes through like maybe 3,000, 5,000 or more, and so it's a long history, but then have always has a great meaning spiritually, culturally. And so, this symbol should be recognized basically because, the interface, of course, is start with the little conversation between Jewish and Christian about, understanding of the what do you call it? Well, in a way, Abrahamic traditions, they just start talking about it. And then they have a conversation with those two religions in general. That's an interface begin with, but yet it started, growing, and then later they accept or try to communicate with the Islamic tradition. So that's the group coming up. Then so that was a conversation. But yet later on, especially probably after 9/11 and everything, well, actually Interfaith Center was there before the 9/11. So Baba Jain is a very important person for start with the Interfaith Center of New York too. But at that time, it's already interface. But then the one of the reasons I was in was because of the Mr. Baba Jain invited me to share more thoughts from the Buddhist views and so forth, from the especially Eastern view, and so the Eastern revision is an important part of the interfaith, right? So if that's the case, now we've been doing the interfaith many years, isn't that the time to really recognize what's one of the important symbol in a religious history? And then in terms of the bad sort of like image of the swastika is only for the West, especially Nazi Germany. After that, it's only 100 years or less than 100 years still. And so I feel like it's important to recognize because it should be equally recognized, not just the Western symbol, Western religion is important, but rather interfaith meaning, all religion has something to offer. So we try to work together and learn together. That was an interface for me. So because of that, this symbol itself has a lot of meaning. I mean, it's a kind of one of the symbol, which is really interface because at least all the dharmic tradition has shared this particular symbol, and also this symbol is used for the like a Hakenkreuz, which is hooked cross, right? So in a way, it's a Christian symbol too, and so it was part of the long history and rich history of the human beings, especially in terms of religion and also, spirituality or the culture. So from that sense, it is very important to bring the swastika back not just pushing away from the other race. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to bring this discussion today. And do I have a time? Because
yeah, so we'll move to,
it's
we'll
5
come back
minutes,
to
right?
you.
So maybe I stop from here. Is that good enough?
Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's a good introduction. And indeed, as you said, the swastika is used currently by close to 2 billion people around the world. And it's a symbol, its equivalents have been used by other traditions like the Native Americans, the indigenous traditions in the United States and Canada, as well as around the world, ancient African traditions, even the Jewish traditions. Judaism has a similar looking symbol in it. And I found that in some of the synagogues as well when I was doing my research. So thank you for bringing that up. We'll move to Babaji. Babaji, please go ahead.
Namaste. Shalom. Good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to join this evening, especially because of my brother TK-san. TK and I've known Venerable Nakagakis over 25 years in this lifetime. I think we go back to a few lifetimes. My dear brother and older brother, Professor Nathan Katz, one of the most respected Jewish scholars. I have enjoyed meeting him at different occasions, and it's always been very enriching. And now I think, Nikunj, I don't think you were born when I'm talking about, because you're so young. And,
not that young, Jeff, but yes, I'm still born then.
Yeah, Jeff and Ragini, I have not met you, but I'm delighted. So, let me go back when you talk about this subject. We started exploring bringing the Hindu and Jewish traditions together after the Millennium Summit at the UN. That's when we had brought all these religious leaders from over 120 countries for the first time to the United Nations in the year 2000. And in 2003, we took a delegation to Israel. And that delegation was called Look, Listen, and Learn. And amongst the delegation from the Hindu side was Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who's been like a father in my lifetime and very close to my Guru, Acharya Sushil Muniji. So when we went there and we had arranged very sensitive private meetings, everything was off the record. First condition was nothing on record. So when we talked to the Jewish leaders at that time, he said, Baba, we have to do something with our Jewish leaders. Both of our communities have suffered immensely. I said, yes, Swamiji. So I had extensive relations with Chief Rabbi Lau, especially, the older one, who again was like a father to me. In fact, he came to my wedding to bless me also, which was rather historic because normally he wouldn't do that, but that was the love. And so it took me almost 5 years to get the first Hindu-Jewish summit arranged in India. And I'll tell you this, to understand the complexities, yes, the swastika is a sacred symbol to the Dharmic traditions. But the reality today and the perception is the emotions are so heavily charged because the greatest crime of the last century was perpetrated by Hitler on specifically the Jewish community. And this became his symbol. This became the symbol of hate. And this was so identified. So even though we negotiated with the chief rabbinate, I have the reports here in front of me. I'm happy to share them. TK-san has the links. And we have specific language. It couldn't get more specific. I'll read this clause for this. It says, swastika is an ancient and greatly auspicious symbol of the Hindu tradition. It is inscribed on Hindu temples, ritual altars, entrances, and even account books. A distorted version of this sacred symbol was misappropriated by the Third Reich in Germany and abused as an emblem under which heinous crimes were perpetrated against humanity, particularly the Jewish people, and goes on. This was signed by the most important Jewish leaders. And this was published at the Chief Rabbinate of Israel in Jerusalem. This happened in Jerusalem. But yet today, you can hold this up, but the moment you see a swastika symbol, the emotions get heavily charged. So I think there are some challenges for us. I want to be pragmatic about it and recognize, remember, the Jewish community and us, we have suffered similar heinous crimes. Nobody talks about the persecution or the genocide under the British rule in India. That happened, okay? That doesn't get documented because it didn't have the attention, but that did happen. So what I would propose is, number one, what we say is, we have to first engage the Jewish community and start to share these kind of things. Here's a document which the senior most Jewish leaders, the American Jewish Committee was involved in this from America. They were all involved and they all agreed to the sanctity and sacredness of the swastika. So here, first is engage with the leaders across the spectrum. Second, make them understand this is the thing. And then start to launch very slowly a campaign to disavow the swastika as a symbol of hate. I say, take away the power from these, what should I say? I cannot even call them, I have difficulty in sometimes calling these people human beings, because they know the atrocities that were committed on 6 million people, innocent children. I took the senior most Muslim leaders 2 years ago to Auschwitz. One is, I would say, as much as possible, every person in the world needs to go and visit Auschwitz and see what happened there. You will realize why this symbol has become so ingrained as a symbol of hate and divide that is difficult to understand the sacred history. You're right, Nikunj. Even there was some excavation, a 10,000-year-old synagogue remnants are found. And in the mosaic of that, if you see, you can see it's a symbol of the swastika. This is in the land of Israel. Okay, this happens on the bank of Tiberias, the place which Magdala, the Christians own it, the Catholic Church. They unearthed this old synagogue. And I've seen the mosaic of that. So if you go back to history, yes, there is. But we have to deal with the reality today, how it is perceived, what we can do. So engage in public life. Disavow swastika as a symbol of hate. And build relations, build trust. When you're there to support each other, then they'll have a better understanding that we need to come and support each other. And if you take away the power from these people who are using the swastika as a symbol of hate and stop reacting to it, imagine what can happen. I dream of that. I honestly do. Imagine if we could say, stop reacting to swastika and say, rather change the narrative and say, this is a sacred symbol of the Eastern traditions. Over 2 billion people follow it. 1/3 of the world. 1/3 of the world, people. So say, this is sacred to them. This is not a symbol of hate and divide. Maybe sometimes we can get somewhere. So build alliances. There are people who are, why it took so long was there were geopolitical interests. So here what I'll close by saying is recognize the geopolitical reality. Today, the new reality that is emerging is closer cooperation of India, Israel, and the USA. That alliance is almost like a leader in the world. If you look at the global geopolitics, use that to the fullest to educate and engage each other and support each other. I think a day is not far when we can indeed work together and say swastika is a sacred symbol, not a symbol of hate and divide.
Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. And I think, I echo those sentiments. I think over the years, the world community has clearly distinguished between the burning cross and the sacred cross, right? So when someone sees a burning cross by the Ku Klux Klan, nobody blames the Christian cross for it, right? So there are ways to distinguish symbols of hate versus sacred symbols, and the hooked cross versus the swastika needs to be done. So thank you for that. I think engagement is really critical. I think the word you used is really important, and building those alliances between nations and between communities, really, really critical, while recognizing the death and genocide that has occurred for various communities, right? Of course, the Jewish community, the Romas, right? We also have to understand that the Romas were also 1.5 million Romas were also killed at the hands of the Nazis. So many deaths have happened.
Don't forget the Armenians.
Yeah,
Don't
the
forget
Armenians
too.
You have many different groups. So the reason I bring up the Romas is because they have a direct connection to Hindus and India, right? So in a certain way, we are also impacted directly from that perspective. So moving on, I want to bring in Dr. Nathan Katz. So Dr. Katz, please go ahead.
Thank you, my friend. Shalom Aleichem. Namaste. All greetings in every language, in every heart. Wonderful presentations already. So I'm going to do my best. I'm just going to tell you 3 little stories, and I have a watch here.
That's okay.
So the first one, I was born in the United States just a few years after the Holocaust, late 1940s. And I have a very early memory. I'm not sure how old I was, early 1950s. And no one spoke about the Holocaust then. It was too fresh. Elie Wiesel had not written Night. In fact, he couldn't bring himself to write anything. All right, so this is where the world is still just in shock, or people who cared were in shock. And I recall listening to a conversation. I remember my grandfather and grandmother and my mother and some relatives I didn't even know and can't remember were talking. And somehow, I don't know if those relatives had just come from Europe. I don't have it clear, but they were describing to my grandfather and grandmother and mother some of the atrocities that they heard about, they saw, I don't know. And atrocities especially against young children. So that was my first introduction to the Holocaust before I don't even people knew that had the name Holocaust yet. And I knew also that there were Nazis, I learned quickly, and they had this swastika symbol. Okay, that was my knowledge. Then not long thereafter, I remember visiting my best friend 2 doors down the street in New Jersey from where I lived. And in their hallway, when you walked into the foyer of their building, there was tiles, and in the tiles were swastikas. Yeah, my friends, their name was Levin. I know they're not Nazis. What is this? I said, what are you doing? What is this here for? Good first reaction. And my friend told me, oh, well, that's really a Native American symbol. That means good luck. Maybe I was 5, 6. But at that moment, I had no problem. I understood that this shape meant this in Native American world and this in Europe. And it was that simple to a child, and we got to make it that simple again. So that's my first thing. Swastika was there in the United States. We just, we never thought of it until we saw the Germans, the Nazi symbol, and they said, well, what's this? And that was it. Story number 1. Story number 2. It's maybe 20, 25 years ago. I was studying with a Swami, a woman, here in Florida, who was a disciple of a very eminent teacher, no names. And she was taking diksha, or a kind of initiation, from this teacher. And part of the initiation ritual was to take from the vibhuti, from the ash, and make the swastika on the forehead. Now, she is from Brooklyn, sounded like she was from Brooklyn all her life, totally Jewish accent, totally Jewish, who had become a Hindu and become a Swami. And here's the confirmation, the diksha, the authorization, and she's a Swami. So the guru goes to put the vibhuti on her forehead. No, I can't do that. No, and she had sort of an argument with her guru as to why that was absolutely impossible to her. The guru, I'm sure, didn't understand all the details of why she responded that way, but he respected her passion on it. And he did the ritual without using a swastika. That's story number 2. So I'm saying that. Now, here's a woman who is committed to Hinduism, who's from a Jewish family, is Jewish as well, Hindu, as we say now, who could not abide a Hindu swastika on her body, which she saw as she couldn't separate in her mind from tattoos and this horror. And she's your friend. Second story. And the third story is like this. We're good. I love to lead tours, mostly because I love to go to India. So when I was still teaching, I would lead tours all over different places in India, doing different things. And in retirement, my wife and I, as mentioned, lead Jewish interest tours when it was still possible to travel. So one tour I led was on goddess worship in Himachal Pradesh, that area. So I have my students, we're going from Devi temple to Devi, and it's wonderful. Having a great time. It was the season for festivals. And so I always like to pick up little souvenirs from temples, especially. So at one of the Devi temples, I picked up this, Jai Mataji. and of course 2
Yeah.
Lord's swastikas on it. When I got home, I wanted to show you this the other day. I couldn't find it. When I got home, I took this and I put it on my office wall. And the purpose of putting it on my office wall, and it was very effective, Professor Katz, what's that doing here? And I could explain that the same shape means different things in different cultures. The same thing I was told when I was very young. It's not complicated. And with this, just a little bit of goodwill, it gets across. So I want my students to see this because I was teaching about Hinduism in India, but I also wanted them to understand how symbols work. And symbols, or actually a sign, whatever you call it, is not the same everywhere. That's all.
Yeah.
It is a holy, beautiful thing. Or a Nazi flag is the most repulsive thing in my life ever created in the world. But it's just not a hard distinction to make. That's all I have to say. You understand from what you said already, I know you understand that this can be excruciatingly difficult for Jews. We see that thing and it's like we see the devil. And when we see the devil, we're scared. We see this, we're scared, we're angry, all that. It's almost in our DNA. I was too young to have that in the early 50s. Right? I was a little kid. So when he said, oh, that's Native American, okay, cool. And that settled it for me. But I understand also my Swami friend who couldn't fully do the Diksha ceremony because of the swastika. You have to understand that too. And if you get it, then, you know, in my heart at all times, I'm a teacher. I use whatever I can to teach, not only about Hinduism, but about the multivalence, if I can use a religious studies word, of symbols. Thank you all. Thank you.
No, beautifully put. And that's the kind of understanding that all of us are coming to over the years. And one of the things that I have noticed is I had the same perception. You know, when I started this campaign and we started Kona, when the New York State was trying to ban the swastika as a symbol in their education policy, one of the things that happened was I did 3 months of research on this whole topic of swastika. And then I came to a conclusion that actually Hitler never used the word swastika, nor did he use the swastika. His idea of the symbol was always connected to his sort of background from a Christian tradition, because Germany was a very Christian country, is a very Christian country. So using a foreign symbol didn't make sense. It did not appeal to the crowd, right? So now having said that, obviously, that was the research that we came up with. So to your point, symbols have a context, right? So for me, the word swastika is copyrighted, right? It's copyrighted by 3 different traditions, the Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains, because they're rooted in Sanskrit and it's a Sanskrit word, versus the Hakenkreuz or the Nazi hooked cross is the German word. So we need to put the hate or the denouncing of the symbol where it really belongs, which is the Hakenkreuz. So I think with understand this, the second point I want to make is, as you mentioned, see, a lot of times what happened was India was colonized. So for many years, we did not have our own narrative. After 1947, I would argue we still did not have our narrative. As information technology, as information dissemination increased, many of us became more and more aware. So when you have awareness, that's where you start. So now that we are aware, you start to talk about this more and more. And you know, people like yourself, Dr. Katz, are really the ambassadors and the bridges between communities to bring about this understanding, because you are from that tradition and you understand these traditions and these traditions. So thank you again for that. Jeff, I would like you to speak next and talk about your research and how it all came about for you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nikunj and Dr. Katz and everybody else who has spoke thus far. Just a very brief background on myself, and then I'll have a couple comments on some of the prior pieces of some speakers there. Just so, for me, I grew up in a Jewish household in the Massachusetts area, you know, very much traditional kind of Reform conservative Jewish background. I went to a day school in Greater Boston area, which is a just Jewish private school, learning Talmud, Tanakh, Jewish thought classes, everything through. And I think being a Jew in the community in that area, and really anywhere in the world, when I was growing up, and certainly before, the symbol of the swastika, or the Hakenkreuz, as I think more and more people are coming to call it, understandably had so much, implied violence really in it. And I think one of the things I wanted to comment on that, Dr. Katz had stated was that there is very much a difference, I believe, between, a shape and an actual symbol. There's, so often we speak of the symbols, but, symbols have meaning, and a shape simply could be a triangle, could be a circle. So there isn't the meaning imbued in it. And then another comment that you had made, Nikunj, that I found was interesting in terms of kind of the copyrights of the swastika with those three groups. The only groups I would actually add to that there, of course, are dozens of different indigenous peoples throughout the North America, Latin America, and the world that have seen this symbol as a holy, auspicious, or sacred symbol of benevolent intent, throughout the eras. But so going back and kind of jumping around here a little bit, but when I was going for my master's in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, I was trying to decide ultimately what my particular master's thesis was going to be on. And I had stumbled across TK Nakagaki's great book. I'll do a plug for you there, TK. That's the Buddhist swastika and Hitler's cross. And really was just absolutely blown away by, some of the history that I had never been taught, all the way through, even going for a master's at a Jewish private school, Gratz College in the greater Philly area, that, you just really aren't taught about all these different historical pieces of Hitler only using the terms Hakenkreuz, the entire German piece there of Hakenkreuz itself meaning hooked cross. And I think we do a disservice to the understanding of these symbols historically when we lose that connection that it had to a Christian cross itself. And I could go on, but I'll probably leave it there for now.
Oh, wonderful. And, I want to hear a little bit more about your research and how you came about that conclusion. But I want to bring in Dr. Ragini Sharma. Ragini ji, you're on mute. So if you can unmute, the first thing. The second thing is, if you can talk about, as a practicing Hindu, what is your thought about swastika? That's the first thing. And then let's also spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the things that are going on in Canada and what, just kind of giving an update, because some of the people who are in the US and even in Canada don't know what's really happening. So please go ahead.
Well, I want to start with shalom and namaste to all. And I'm so honored to be here and to listen to this esteemed panel. And, I'm in wonder, in a place of wonder. But I would like to start with the prayer for peace, the Swasti mantra. Swasti na Indro Vritrashravaha, Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedaha, Swasti na Starksharyo Arishtanemihi, Swasti no Brahaspratir Dadhatu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. As you can see, swastik, like the Om, is one of the most auspicious symbols for Hindus. It's a Sanskrit word that means that which brings good luck and well-being. And I say that not for this panel, which they already know, but for those who are going to listen and they may not know. And it's commonly seen in Hindu homes, businesses, and temples across the world. As a Hindu, I recall that every puja or festival celebrated started with drawing the swastik. At my wedding, the Pandit came and created a sacred space in our home by drawing a swastik. You may have heard about Hindus drawing a swastik on their cars before they drive it as a blessing. We'll draw it anywhere. And you may have heard about the swastika asana as well for meditation. So it's very much part of our daily life. And it's very intrinsic to our spiritual practices. So here in Canada, where I've been here for 40 years, it really wasn't something that I thought about until recently when I'll come to it. But I did some research starting last year when this issue came up around early last year, when efforts were made to rename certain places, which I'll talk about. But the effort started in Canada to ban the swastika, obviously due to the misunderstanding of it representing the Nazi hooked cross. There is a mining town in Ontario, I found out, that's called Swastika. And there was a petition made to change its name, but the residents of that town refused. And they said, this name has been there before the World Wars, and it's for good luck. So no, thank you. Similarly, recently, over the last few years, there is a private road named Swastika Trail in Puslinch Township near Guelph, Ontario, and several efforts, I think 4 or 5 times, an individual, I think one particular individual has been trying to get that name changed. Again, the residents who live on the street refuse to change the name because the name has no connection to the Nazi symbol of hate. But in early 2020, a local member of parliament allowed the resident to start a House of Commons petition to change the name of the street, and also to request a ban on the public use of swastika in the whole of Canada. That's what got me jumping. So they had, on their petition, they received 2,046 signatures, along with the support of one Jewish group. However, it seems that the petition never did get tabled into Parliament, probably because the Hindu community reached out to the MP and implored him not to support this any further. So we're grateful to that MP. And also because we had a counter petition on change.org, which got a lot more support with 4,500 signatures. So we did send that petition to Prime Minister Trudeau, and we did get a response from him, from his office, informing us that he would have the Minister of Equity, MP Chagar was his name at that time, look into our concerns. And we're following up with that. So recently, as you may be aware, that the Nazi hooked cross hate symbol was seen at the truckers' protest in Ottawa. So Hindus were very disappointed when in Parliament, Mr. Trudeau spoke about the inherent violence of the swastika in this regard. We were shocked when just Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the opposition NDP, tweeted a petition for public support to ban the swastika, calling it a hate symbol. An MP from his party tabled a motion in Parliament to propose the ban on the swastika, and it has passed its first reading on February 3rd. So now the Hindu community is working to fight this egregious attack, what we feel on our holy symbol, and the incorrect linking it with the Nazi hooked cross. We appreciate all the help that Kona has provided us so far, and for this esteemed panel, this is also going to help our cause. So big thank you to all. I want to add a little bit about my experience in the education field. Over the past years, I've been a volunteer with many different school boards. And I firmly believe, my experience has been that I firmly believe that Canadians are reasonable people. And I feel that an effective campaign of education about the difference between the swastika and the Nazi hooked cross can win our fight against this ban, as Kona and others have been able to achieve in the US and apparently also in Australia. In my experience in working with public schools, boards and parents, I'm aware of instances where education-based advocacy has worked. I love Dr. Katz, your story, so I'm going to tell one here. I did hear from a parent of a little girl. She was probably 7 or 8, and she wanted to present on the swastika in her classroom, and her teacher was shocked. She said, absolutely not. This is not allowed. And to the credit of the parents, they actually went and met with the teacher. She didn't agree. They met with the principal and they explained everything. This child had a beautiful little story, a slideshow. They showed it to her, and the principal said, "That's absolutely fine. You can do this." So that was allowed in a public school right here. So that showed me that, if we put our efforts in education, that change can be achieved. And I have to tell you that I have met with several school boards here, people who are, superintendents and people who are directors of equity and anti-racism, and they're absolutely open. They are receptive. And they do feel that if they knew the difference, then how could they justify hating the Hindu swastik? And I think the way that I've approached them is the concern for the safety of the Hindu children, because there's a huge amount of bullying happening for the children, and they're made to feel ashamed of being Hindu and having this sign associated with their tradition and culture. When this esteemed panel know, and many people might know, that India is maybe the only country where Hindus have never ever persecuted the Jews. Dr. Katz, with great humility, I mentioned that. Yes, and the first synagogue outside, the home was in Cochin in India, and Hindus continue to welcome Jews to celebrate and be together as a family. So from one sister to all my brothers here, big namaste, and hope that we can work together for mutual respect and harmony, and call it what it is. The Hindu swastika is not the hate symbol. Thank you very much. And I'm working with a large group of Hindu leaders, and they would appreciate your support. I want to end with the mentioning that we have in Canada what is called the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms from 1982, which guarantees all faiths the right to practice their religion freely. And I hope that we don't have to take that route, but I hope that can be the guiding light for us to have freedom to use the swastika.
No, wonderful.
Namaste.
Thank you. Really appreciate your thoughts on that. And I think, as you had mentioned, Kona has launched the campaign, and we welcome everybody who's here today, the attendees. If you're from Canada, if you know people from Canada, they can certainly join. I will, if you go to kona.org, or you can send an email, info@kona.org, you can join us on that. We would love to have you as part of that campaign, and we will be working with groups in Toronto. We have our own volunteers in different parts of the greater Toronto area, but also in Canada in general. So we're going to be launching different types of campaigns and educational seminars and things like that. So this is one of them as we speak today. But what I wanted to do is there are a couple of questions. What I would like to do is, please, whoever has two questions, please put the questions in the Q&A. Because I can't understand I have two questions, but have no questions there. So please put them in the Q&A. The first one is, someone has mentioned, what can we do? What is the action plan? How they can contribute? So I think we talked about some of them. Maybe what I would suggest is maybe, Balaji, if you want to share some thoughts, what are some things that people can do? What are some of the things that you're doing today that people can be, sort of join or understand?
Yeah, no. There's also a comment which I must think one of the people in the panelists, I think, raised a very valid point of the Mughals who systematically annihilated the Hindus, the Sikhs, the Jains, the Buddhists during all their conquests and invasions. And we'll be remiss to not recognize that as a heinous crime in history also. But coming to practical steps, number one, the most important thing is engaging. However you can, wherever you can, I would say go to your town halls, educate the elected officials, call for a town hall meeting. Call for a town hall meeting and have a frank discussion and use the materials which we have, share with them, that one. The second part, which I have found very effective, is engage people of the different religions in your community, have them you take and make an effort and understand what is sacred to them, the days of their holy observances, what it means. And then you can have a chance to share what is sacred to you and what is sacred days and what they mean. That will be a point of building some understanding and trust. And then you can start to introduce these subjects, these two. And third is, with any opportunity that you can get, encourage people to go to Auschwitz and see what happened there. This is horrible, horrible, horrible. Each time I go there, I mean, whenever I think about it, it brings tears to my heart, because they are young children, as Nathanji pointed, and you see the locks of the hair and the shoes. That image must be brought out, that we must stand in solidarity with the Jewish community and never allow that to happen. Last, anti-Semitism is a very weak word. The truth is, this is hatred for the Jews, the people who are jealous of the Jewish community and their successes. Let's call it for what it is and stand in solidarity with the Jewish people whenever that happens. And disavow swastika as a symbol of hate.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeff, I want to ask you, you're sort of like a younger generation person who has sort of changed his understanding or evolved from an understanding perspective. How did you, in your research, you sent me your research paper, and I was fascinated how you kind of like, got that story into it, and your ultimate idea of distinguishing the symbols, right? Of the emblems, however you want to call it. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your perspective as, someone who's from the Jewish background. What do you think? How can we engage in this particular dialogue?
Yeah, no, thank you, Nikunj, for sure. And the age piece aside, I think the most important variable here certainly is related to really the fact that the symbol of the Nazi symbol, if we can just, so that we all understand what we're talking about there. The Nazi symbol itself, the Hakenkreuz as it was, I think one of the key pieces to go back to that, I experienced and grew through, and so many Jews still feel, is there's this massive hesitation that's based on a very understandable fear that redeeming or reclaiming or restoring or whatever we want to use to the swastika will open that symbol up again to be used as a tool for violence. But I think one of the things that, my studies were based in was always, there's unfortunately far too many mass atrocities throughout our, the humanities history. I mean, people think of, sometimes I talk to groups and they'll say, oh, well, the Holocaust was a fairly one-off event, right? And I say, well, I mean, we had the Cambodian genocide throughout the 70s, we had Rwanda in the 1990s. According to various different studies, there's actually been 70 different genocides since World War II alone, and that's 70, not 17. So the fact is, these things are not anomalous. They are ongoing. There's absolutely a reason for us all to put a great deal of energy, resources, time, money, and effort into preventing them. But I think it's off the mark to think that, essentially banning a symbol or containing it is in any way actually helping prevent those things. If anything, I think the evidence would show that it's more likely to enable through a sort of quote unquote forbidden fruit sort of entity. When in fact, the Nazis themselves had various different symbols and groupings, and being able to get together, their own freedom of speech, as it were, curtailed in various different ways as the Weimar Republic continued to degenerate. So we find that as you restrict, oftentimes, even specifically in the case of the Nazis, that very in and of itself, in many ways, actually did help them rise. The other thing to think about is that Hitler himself was an artist. Here was a, effectively evil genius, but nevertheless, brilliant as it related to colors and shape and form and symbolism. And Hitler spent a great deal of time. He spends a good amount of time in Mein Kampf, his infamous book, talking about how this symbol was in fact well thought out. And he drew on some other folks, and obviously he didn't come up with the shape, but in terms of the colors and the 45-degree angle and the degree that it's tilting, and that full combination of the black actual lines, the white circle, and then the red backdrop that is so terrifying to so many today. I think we have to understand that that really was tied to this very evil person. And that person isn't coming back. But this symbol, if we continue to essentially try to, regulate it out of existence, one, I don't think that's possible. I think the fact that you have billions of people on this earth that see parts of the shape, at least, in this benevolent, auspicious way, I think inevitably at some point, maybe it's 50 years, 100 years, if you think long enough time frame, I think at some point, it's not that people would necessarily forget, the Holocaust and these atrocities, God forbid, but some of that symbol, I think, will organically come to be more and more used in this auspicious way. And because of that, I think really the Jewish community and humanity at large really has to now seize this moment when it's still fresh enough, 70 plus years behind us, to focus on, what can we learn from the violence of that symbol? What can we do to specifically, understand that it was just a shape here? And what can we do to really remember those different components accurately so that we can prevent its rise? But again, also properly understand all of that history. So I think there's a number of different pieces there I spoke to, but I don't like to go on for too long. So I'll throw it back to you for a moment.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. One question that was, I think, maybe Dr. Katz, how do we start the outreach to the Jewish community? Which is like a really key to understanding this whole issue. What are some of your thoughts?
The Jewish community is rather hierarchical and stratified, the organized Jewish community. So there's a Jewish federation or something like that where you live. There's a synagogue council. For better or worse, you have to start from the top and go down with our community. We're just used to authority, I guess you could say. What I did really early in the game, I was, I lived where Bala lives now in Tampa for 10 years, and a Hindu temple was being built. It was a wonderful thing. And I knew all the people there, so I talked with our rabbi in our synagogue. We, all right, let's invite them over to see what we do. Spend a service with us. And we always eat whenever we can, including after praying. And we invite them, come see what we do, listen, whatever. And we always have a meal, so come have a meal. So I had explained to the sisterhood, who kindly, generously prepared the meals, that it has to be vegetarian to the extent of no eggs. And then, oh my God, how can we cook without eggs? And they looked up recipes, but it was such a learning experience because the Jews saw here Hindus with even more crazy rules than we have. We got to respect that. And they came over and they so appreciated, they didn't do a very good job with the meal, but they so appreciated the effort. So it's really a lovely event. So I think, when there's an issue that comes up in your town, like you're seeing in Canada, go to the top, go to the federation, or the head of the rabbinical council, whatever it's called. But I also believe in what do you call it? Down to earth, one-on-one, or one group on one group. If there's a Hindu temple, try to reach out to a synagogue. If you're in a synagogue, try to reach out to a Hindu temple. We're all lovely people, really. People may not think so. And when we get to know each other, we'll find wonderful folks who feel very similar to the way we do on so many issues. So 2 ways, top and grassroots, both can be done.
Awesome. And Dr. Nakagaki, I know you've been very active in this sphere also in New York with the Buddhist Council and other spaces. You want to share your thoughts?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, everyone. I enjoy listening to everyone at the same time. So I really appreciate it very much. But yeah, myself is also, this is important because interfaith I mean, I just said Interfaith Harmony Week. It is actually try to create the harmony together. So that's why we have a dialogue here like today. And then the experience for the swastika itself is a very kind of enlightening in many different ways. Because first of all, maybe even like a Jewish people never understand this part or something, and because I even don't want to talk or even bring up this kind of swastika before, but one of the things is one of the things that I like to really see is I wrote the book simply because we need to have some kind of the resources to talk about, because before I think this book, everything has to be swastika, has to be evil. I mean, that's it. And if you are talking about the swastika good, you cannot publish that book, because that's why it took me like 7 years to publish this particular book. And then that was a very different time maybe, but after that I was able to start talking and reach out to the community. So I'm expecting more book about the swastika, because I wrote that this book is called The Buddhist Swastika and the Hitler's Cross, because I'm from the Buddhist, so that's why I try to write from the Buddhist view. So I really wanted to see, of course, first of all, maybe the swastika, even like from the Jain or Hindu, of course, but then even swastika in the Native Americans, swastika from the even Jewish point, also the Jewish people write it, but because everybody can have their own experience and share, and because I mean it is a very important topic, I believe. And so the education is one thing that we talk about. In order to have education, we do have all different materials and resources. The more resources we have, I mean, correct resources, the things I was going to talk today, actually, because I thought I was going to talk about 10 minutes, but it's still 5 minutes. So I just had only the introduction. So, but then one of the things that I feel like, because, the one thing that this was my dissertation, right? I started with the only Eastern swastika. I wanted to tell people this is an Eastern swastika, but the thing is, every time I talk about it, I got the question from the people saying, this. So why Hitler used this symbol? I mean, very simple questions, but yet every time people ask, at that time nobody knows whether Hitler know the swastika exists. I mean, that was the somehow big questions. I have to answer this question because so many times then I have to answer. That's why I start learning what is a swastika. I mean, what's a relation between West, I mean, swastika in the West and swastika in the East. And so so half of the book is really I don't know anything about it. It's like, but then as far as the research, I do have my own way of researching, which is going to the resources. I mean, ultimate source. So which is, I just use the Mein Kampf as a main resource, like a sutra. We have a sutra study in Buddhism. Then we just go to the source, what the Buddha said first, then the commentaries and so forth. But nowadays, so many commentaries, which is kind of filled with the false information, not really accurate information. So that's why we just go to the accurate one, the real source of it. So the Hitler is one source, or the books or speech. So that's where my book is all about. And then I ignore entire things about after the war. So because so many things colored, because that was a political thing too, right? Many way political things are colored, but census is done. Even like a Mein Kampf, we try to talk about today. I try to talk about today is one of the translation. Only first translation, the Edgar Dugdale, he translated the Hakenkreuz, as hooked cross. And then everybody else after that, but then even that particular one is very, very limited one. It's not the fully translated. Like a main part, Hitler explained the, Hakenkreuz means, victory of Aryans and all those things. Those are not, that part is missing because the censorship, they don't show all the, particular version. But then the other part he mentioned about the Hakenkreuz. So that's why you can see that's a hooked cross. He translated, but that's the only one. After that, everything is a swastika. So I mean, those are actually really misleading. I mean, Hitler himself never says swastika, first of all. And then hooked cross is okay. That's a translation, but Hitler never used it. Why do we use the words like swastika is as if Hitler created? But it's not. Hitler is always focused on his own symbol, which is a Hakenkreuz, hooked cross. Because, as somebody mentioned, it's a Christian thing. So it's like Catholic and Protestant together with a cross under the new cross, but this is actually old cross too. So that's why, there's the German people together under this cross, right? So it's nothing to do with swastika, actually, so-called. But then, on the other hand, there is the background of the swastika itself as popular at that time. So, those things are coming. But then, what I'm saying is those facts are not shared. And they don't teach. They only teach the one that they want people to know. Swastika is an evil symbol. That's all what they wanted to know. So that's why one time I was really shocked to hear that swastika is a universal symbol of evil. That's what makes me to do this kind of job. Because before I was thinking, that of course West, we don't want it to hurt the, Jewish people. Because actually I used the very beginning, 1986, that I bring the, the Buddha's birthday. We put the flower shrine and then we put the swastika in the end. So then everybody just came and said, oh, you can't do this one here in this country. You have to be kind to the, other people. You're Buddhist priest, right? You know what the compassion is about, So we want to be compassionate. So which means, meaning we don't want to hurt anybody by using the swastika. That's why it's a strange thing is many Buddhists in this country, the ones who are raised Buddhist in this country, they don't know even the swastika is a Buddhist symbol. But yet, all the Asian people who came to the United States, of course we know, but then we shouldn't use it because we don't want to hurt other people by, bringing those things. But now, opposite. We just, why do we have to be, kind? But now it's a hurt our own tradition. Then maybe this is have to change the thing because it's not a universal symbol of evil. This is maybe in the West, maybe that's a symbol of the evil, but not the other country. Sorry for the long comments, but that was actually my things that I wanted to say today because the fact itself has to be really clear. Then based upon that, and we can have a dialogue. And I wanted to see more dialogue coming up. So that was my intention for this. And then the movie as well, like a documentary film we're making. So Manji is coming up very soon. They said, damn everything in the content. So now go to the, that they try to do for the movie, what do you call it, those competition. And so
festivals, yes. The movie festival, yes.
But anyway.
Dr. Katz, you were saying something?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I noticed one of the comments in the chat that popped up was from my dear friend, Dr. Ram Agarwal. And he said, but there are connections between Hitler and Hinduism. And unless those are not denied, at least, if not, it's not going to get very far. You mentioned the word Aryan. You know where the word Aryan comes from? Aryani Chattari Sachani, the four holy truths. It's a word for holy or noble. I can just mention, I'm sure you know, Max Muller and this looking for a common Indo-European language of the Aryan people, and there's some ideas that Sanskrit and English and German have some words in common, which they do. There are borrowings. All that's so, but there is an influence, and it'd be disingenuous to say there's no influence of some issues, some topics, ideas in Hinduism and Nazism. Swastika wasn't one of them, it seems, which is paradoxical. That's my first point. Second, so the stuff is there. That's got to be part of the story. It's part of the discussion. Saying about the name Hakenkreuz and swastika. Yeah, you've convinced me that, especially when you tell me, as you just did, sir, that Hitler did never use the word swastika. Wow, okay. I didn't know for sure. Now I'm convinced. that what was brought into Nazism was not a swastika in their mind. Granted, as a Hakenkreuz, okay, but what we have today, the reality, it got solidified, and they see, people here see that sign, and it's swastika, and you can't tell him, no, it's really a Hakenkreuz. Well, that's very interesting, and I believe it's very true, and it certainly does change our perception, but we're dealing with powerful emotions and history and a whole bunch of things. Yes, I'm convinced swastika and Hakenkreuz had no original connection, but the connection's made, and we can't make the connection go away. We can make the connection a little milder, a little softer, with all the kind of things we've been talking about. That no, Hitler never used the word swastika. You got me on that one, my friend. Good for you.
No, I agree though, totally.
Please,
But
please.
you said,
Please.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. I mean, the way I look at it is that, you know, there's definitely the sensitivity around this, but at the same time, it, you know, again, the association, the wrongful association, was not created by the people who hold swastika, right? So it was created by the, you know, for example, the New York Times, right? Dr. Nakagaki talks about it. I talk about it in my research, that it was actually the New York Times that planted this first in the media. Okay, in the around 1931 or 33 was the first time.
We have the same enemies, don't we?
Yeah, and by the way, Ashley
read
Rinsberg
my
has
book.
actually talked about how the New York Times failed to cover the Holocaust, right? So there's a lot of issues with the New York Times in general, and the Hindu phobia that is covered by New York Times. All these things are there, but the reason this is important is because we believe in the fundamental pursuit of truth, as Hindus, as Buddhists, as Jains, people of the Dharmic tradition.
Yes.
When we find the truth, we fight for it, and we say Satyameva Jayate, that the truth shall win. The truth always wins, right? So we have to pursue the truth, and the truth is that Hitler never used swastika, right? And the fact that there was mischief involved through wrongful translations. E.T.S. Dugdale, as Dr. Nakagaki mentioned, never used the word swastika. He always used the word hooked cross. Then the New York Times, until the 1931 or 33, never used the word. They always used the word Hakenkreuz or the hooked cross. And there is actual illustration and demonstration in my article, as well as Dr. Nakagaki's book. We actually talk about this because it's really, really important that people need to understand that this is how it got popularized. Because when you read media, media shapes the narrative. And the final point, as I mentioned earlier, is that the Hindus never had their own narrative, because we were a colonized people until 1947 and even after that. So now with information age and other things are changing. So I think there is that pursuit of truth that everyone should be, and there should be reconciliation in terms of what's really going on and how, for a mutual understanding, people can move forward. So we're coming on 1 hour and 45 minutes. Yes, Babaji, you can say the final words.
You know, I mean, when you are saying this, let's understand the reality. All these instances when synagogues have been attacked, vandalized, or graffiti, where have you seen Hindus come up in the forefront and stand to go and support with the Jewish people?
Yeah.
We must engage.
Exactly.
Whenever this happens, anywhere there is a symbol or swastika, we must be forefront. Go out there and stand in solidarity. We must be more engaged. We do not get together and build a strong lobby.
Exactly.
Now, Ragini ji mentioned about Jagmeet. Now, how many people know Jagmeet Singh was one of the original people who was proclaiming for Khalistan to be a separate state? He is fundamentally, if you go into his history, been trying to divide up India and keep the separate, the tension between the Hindus and the Sikhs. He comes from that school. How many people realize that? And there's talking about that this guy could be the Prime Minister of Canada. Remember, there were people who were dropped from Trudeau's delegation.
1 second, Ragini.
We have to engage. We are not engaging enough and supporting the Jewish people whenever there are any instances of these hate crimes.
Agreed. No, we
That
need to. We
would
definitely
go
need to.
so far
Yes.
when there's some kind of demonstration against hatred of Jews to see our Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain brothers and sisters there.
Yes.
That would do more to build
Yeah.
a relationship than anything else we could do.
Okay, I have a specific thing, Nikunj. There's an Israel Day parade happens each year.
Right.
I know the people who organize it. This year at the Israel Day parade, let's have a Hindu float.
Okay.
Hindu float there.
Let's talk about it. Absolutely.
Publicly.
Yeah.
I have all the details. I can send them to you because the president is a dear friend of mine. We are working with them. Let's put that together.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not much of a cost, but it will go a long way in building that kind of solidarity and support.
Let's do so. Yeah, let's connect offline. Would love to understand what the whole thing is about and stuff like that. So thank you for that. Raghini ji and Jeff, we're running out of time, but quickly,
Yeah,
go ahead.
just for a moment, I want to thank Dr. Katz for all the excellent points you've made. I just want to mention to you that the connection that some mischievous connections are being made between Aryan and Hitler's influence. I think they're very mischievous. There's a lot of research. I would like to send some to you. The German race, the people, they were looking for some connection base to build their own. It's like they are the ones who misused it. We never suggested any violence towards anybody. So it's the perpetrators of the violence that should be held responsible, not some innocent people whose, Arya means a noble person. It's got nothing to do with what Hitler used it for. And so I think that is another mischief, like Dr. TK has mentioned, is in the mistranslation that has absolutely no bearing. Hinduism is about seekers seeking truth. We have ideas of universal oneness and love for everybody. So there is nothing in our holy texts that speak ill of anybody. So I think we cannot blame anything that Hitler did on the Hindus. So that has to be very clear as well. And absolutely every year, thousands of Jewish soldiers come in vacation in India to find themselves and rest and relax. India is doing more than enough for our Jewish brothers and sisters. So that needs to be recognized. And I think it's not publicized enough how safe Jews are in India. And our partnership is so beautiful and full of love. So all my love to all my Jewish Hindus and Jewish brothers and sisters.
Well,
Namaste.
wonderful. And Jeff, go ahead. Last comments from you.
All right. I'll try to keep it brief and not to gang up on you, Dr. Katz, because I think your comment was very correct in the sense that the comment that, look, the connection has been made. I think that's an accurate assessment of the facts as they stand today. But I don't think it has to be that way, which is kind of what I think, a lot of the research that's rather new is coming forward with. And, I mean, in Nakagaki's book, when did you publish that, Nakagaki? As TK, as recently as 2017 or so. So I mean, it's just a few years ago that some of these pieces were first starting to come forward. I think amongst the Hindu community, Jain and Buddhist, many people have known this for many years. But certainly amongst the Jewish community, of which I am part of, and others, I think there's a lot of education that has to be done. And I also think that when it comes to how a symbol is today, there's a lot of power, I think, oftentimes in taking those symbols. We see this from the LGBT community that takes, the word queer that was once offensive, now it's part of LGBTQ. We see the pink symbol that was used, the pink triangle, rather, that was used, to put on homosexuals and say, that were in death camps, killing centers, and concentration camps. And this turns now into, a symbol of, various different groups in that community. So I think that, there's empowerment to be had there, but there's a very understandable fear, of course, that has to be, acknowledged. And I think the only way to really deal with that is with a lot of education on the grassroots. And frankly, if I'll just add with this point, I believe that the Jewish community has a tremendous opportunity to be able to lead on this issue, because I do believe that if the Jewish community were to look at Hakenkreuz and Swastika as different symbols and be able to acknowledge this piece and understand a lot of the historical educational component behind that, that would take away from white supremacists, from the forces of hate that try to use this symbol, a real tool of propaganda that they're currently trying to use. And I think at the same time, it would enable the beginning of a form of healing that is really quite necessary and still in its earlier forms.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it'll create allyship, right? There's a billion of us out there, so that, which is a very important. And 2 billion, roughly 2 billion people are using the symbol. So that allyship is also critical to create this wedge between the symbols of hate and symbols of prosperity and peace and things like that. So that's where these panels are very important, and more information with more research that as it comes up, I think needs to be then mainstreamed, and our understanding about these complex, sensitive, emotionally charged topics can be changed, can be molded to create mutual understanding, respect for each traditions, while being in solidarity, but while being in partnership to create a better world, right? Who doesn't want to be happy? Yeah. Who doesn't want a better world for themselves and for their kids and for future generations? So for that, I think these types of dialogues, these types of engagements, these types of partnerships are really, really critical. So if somebody had mentioned about this connection of Aryans, right? One of the books that I found was actually, there's a professor in Dartmouth, her name is Susanna Heschel, and she has written a book on that. Yeah. And she talks about how there's a concept of the Aryan Jesus, okay? How the Nazis twisted the whole idea of Jesus and made him somehow Aryan, okay? And that's what's being used in the theories. So there's a lot of interesting evidence that is out there to show how the racist Aryan invasion theory is used. It's actually taught today in classrooms, unfortunately. And that's the amazing part, that when they talk about Hinduism, they always talk about this racist Aryan invasion theory. Yeah. And that is another piece that we need to work on and disavow. If we're going to disavow symbols of hate, if we're going to disavow, the groups that call themselves, something around Aryans in the twisted language, we should be disavowing the Aryan invasion theory and take it out of the curriculum. Only then mutual understanding and respect can be developed. So I want to thank all the esteemed panelists and our attendees to join this fantastic discussions. Always a pleasure to have all of you. And I want to thank you all. I know we were going to go for an hour, but we ended up going for an hour and 25 minutes because this discussion is so wonderful. So shalom and namaste to everybody. And thanks for joining today. I request the panelists to just kind of stay on for a few minutes, and everybody else can take their leave. Thank you.